So let's go back to you described your kind of initial sales approach as shotgun, right? But let's talk about just how did you, so for people that are just starting their companies, I think that one of the, you kind of have two problems, right? Either how do I build a product that people are going to actually like use and like, and the other one is like, how do I actually get them to pay attention to me? Because there's so
Yes.
much noise, right? There's so
Mhm.
much out there that is trying to attract people's attention. Turns out we're not the only B2B software companies trying to sell to marketers.
Mhm.
So how did you kind of get your first, call it 25, 50 customers? What did that process look like? What tools or methods did you find worked really well?
Yeah. So I love telling some of these stories to my team now because
Yeah.
it's like, it's not like you're trying to say back in the day, but it's more like this is how hard it is to get customers, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, so to be honest, like I built some relationships with brands while we were doing the shopping thing. So I at least had people to talk to about what we were
mhm,
building and I could get their feedback on it. So while I wasn't necessarily trying to sell it to them, I had real potential customers who could give me that feedback. But one of the first things that we did was we built lists. So we outsourced, like we kind of found a list of all the brands that we felt were our ICP at the time. We
yep,
outsourced it to Odesk, right? Which was
yeah, yeah,
Odesk at the
yeah,
time. We had contact lists get built. We had somebody come in and set us up with HubSpot as a CRM. And then we
yep,
just started doing each of us. So there were three of us, myself included, who started just doing outbound, right? Like outbound
yep,
email
yep,
campaigns all day, every day, starting in, I guess it was middle of August 2015. And I would
yep,
say by the first week of September, we started to get responses back and started to have conversations. And there was just this really rapid kind of learning process that we went to as we started to, you know, fine tune the pitch, hear what types of things that people needed in a product in order to buy it. Like, thankfully, like my co-founder and our initial development team were just like, they could literally turn kind of like a light version of a feature around over a weekend. Like, we were just
yep,
kind of like,
yep.
you need that, boom, we'd come out with it, we'd put it in a pitch deck, we'd build it, and then we'd demo it. It would only work half the time, but we would get it there if they decided to buy it, when they decided to buy it. But those, so yeah, it was just a lot of like emailing people, to be honest. But there were a
Yep,
few
yep,
brands at the time that I was really into because of the way that they were marketing. One was Revolve, which is still a customer of ours. So at the time,
yep,
they were, you would know them well. They're like, they've crushed it for years in the influencer
yep,
marketing space. They were really just doing the kind of like slam the gram approach back in 2015. They did like Revolve in the Hamptons and like all that kind of stuff. I was like, this stuff is mad. And I actually wrote it, I think before they were a customer, I wrote a couple of blogs about them just because I was so fascinated by what they were doing from a marketing perspective. But Raisa Girona, who's the chief brand officer at Revolve now, I just kept sending her emails. And I think one of them was like, I think it was October or November that year, like Revolve did their Christmas party, and it was like a
yep,
very Instagrammable Christmas party. And
yeah,
at the same time, the same weekend, the Minkoffs opened their Rodeo Drive store, and they made it like an Instagrammable event. And we looked at like the reach of those two events, and Revolve's Christmas party like crushed the Minkoff store opening. And so I wrote Rice an email that like, you beat like 350 million or something, you beat the Minkoffs.
yeah,
And she finally responded to me, and that was like the 20th email I'd sent her or something. So
yeah,
Revolve was one of our first customers, and yeah, continued to be a great customer to this day. Glossier was another brand that I was fascinated by. They were kind of just getting going at the time, really leading the charge from a D2C perspective. Um, I had seen Henry Shandling speak at the conference in New York, and I was just fascinated by what he was saying. So I tweeted him, like I was in the audience, and I tweeted him and said, "Oh, fascinated by what you're doing. Like, we've done some research on you. I would love to share it." And he got back to me on Twitter, and I set up a meeting with him, and we had kind of looked at what they were doing as a brand, and he loved what we were doing, and he loved us as a team. And so they came on. But then, like, I think the one that I'm probably most proud of was Condé Nast. So Condé Nast was one of our first customers across all the major brands. Again, this was like within our first 5 customers, I think, was Condé
Yeah,
Nast.
yeah.
And we, I had a contact who got us in front of the right people. We got in there, we showed them the product. They were like, this is amazing. But they were going through a procurement process. And
Yeah.
we were coming in at like the back end of this procurement process. So we thought we weren't going to make it through. But the team there really liked us. And I called a mentor of mine. I'm like, we've got this great opportunity, but it looks like we're going to get locked out because there's a procurement process. And he's like, forget the procurement process. Just get in there, get people using your product, walk from desk to desk, make them love it, and you're going to win. And so we honestly, so my colleague Mariana and I, we basically got a badge for the Condé offices in New York. We went in there and we just forced them to pilot essentially and like manually onboarded everybody. And lo and behold, we didn't have to go through procurement, but we won the deal.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, I mean, that's like 3 examples, but I think TLDR, it's just hustle, man. That was all it was. Just like
Oh,
pulling out
totally.
all the stuff, being like looking for those great customers who were forward thinking, who got what we do, but then just hustling your way to get in front of them and then believing in your product.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. It's funny that observation on the RFP process because like we get put into these RFP processes all the time. And it's like if people are using like it's like we'll get feedback from the procurement team like, "Ooh, you've got to have China." And it's like otherwise we're just not going to choose you. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, there's like 150 people at your company using our software." So like I don't think they're just going to like suddenly want to stop using it, you know? And I think it's like if you just get people in it and using it, that's kind of the most important factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I love that that's really reminiscent of the like doing things that don't scale motto, right?
Yeah.
Like the Airbnb, like they went around and took photos of people's houses because people didn't have enough good photos. There's like a take a photo button on the website. Um, yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think the funny thing about those, so the Revolves of the world, we didn't start working with them that early. We started working with them maybe 3 years ago, I think. And but I think the most fascinating part about working with companies like that or a Glossier is they're so far ahead of the curve that like if you just observe what they're doing and what they think is important, inevitably the brands that are slower adopters will catch up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Revolve's creating billions of dollars worth of market capitalization doing it. So like that was a process that worked really well for us too, generally.
Yeah, and what we've found the key is we've always believed in building for the early adopters because we want to be
Yeah.
innovators in our market. And the tension for us has always been as we've gotten bigger, as you build more, customers demand more of the like blocking and tackling stuff, like the day to day kind of bless you, the day to
Yes, for
day.
sure.
They demand more of the day to day kind of features, right? Like the kind of boring stuff, but it's the stuff that they need. But you're not, by putting your energy into that, you're not building for the innovators. So we've always said it's our job to run this dual track of build stuff people need but innovate at the same time, and make
Hmm.
sure that we're putting our necks on the line to build things that we don't necessarily know are going to work, but that the most innovative customers are telling us is important to them.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's, we've always tried to balance those two things. So we're always looking for that kind of like that next cohort of innovators that we can kind of work with to build what everybody else is going to use in a couple of years.